Hello and welcome back to The Uncharted Leader. It is my absolute pleasure today to be actually making, firstly, an announcement about something that we have coming up that I'm inviting every one of you to join. And I have had the privilege of being invited to host a panel at the Passionistas Summit coming up there's actually a 3-day event, but the panel that I'm hosting is on the power of transformation in Australian Eastern Standard Time. We're talking about Friday morning on the 23rd, and if you're in the US, there'll be different time zones. If you're in Vancouver or area, it will be in the afternoon on the 22nd. But either way, I'm going to put the links in the show notes for you so that you can get the right details, no matter depending on where you're at around the world. But I do invite you to come, and here's one very simple reason why. The people on this panel are going to blow your mind. And I think that's as easy and as simple as we can get. And the topic is on the power of transformation. So I've managed to pull together who I believe some of the most extraordinary women from around the world who have decades of experience in this area. But not just technically, they are women who have actually done the work personally and who had a personal transformation, and then have gone off into different areas of transformation to specialize in doing that in their work. So you're really just not going to want to miss it. And if you need any more details, just follow me on any one of the social media platforms. LinkedIn is always the best one. But without any further ado, what I'm actually really now going to do is actually take you to the gold, that sits behind this summit. And that is two extraordinary women who have created what's called the Passionistas Project. And Amy and Nancy Harrington, both sisters, they started this mission a few years back. This is actually the 3rd year in a row that they've been running this summit. Their journey actually started with a podcast, actually. Their passion for seeing that what really matters in the world is that we pursue the things that we're deeply passionate about. And, they started on that with a mission, started the podcast, and then what followed the podcast was a pack that helped women kind of expand the impact they have in the world with subscription boxes. But let me just give you a quick spin about who these women are. I was blessed to be introduced to these women last year when they ran their summit, storytellers, and the difference that they're making in the world of storytelling. I can't tell you, I think, just remarkable. But one of the things that's most remarkable is how humble these women are. So I'm going to give you a bit of a spin on their background, and then we're going to talk to both Amy and Nancy about their journey and why they got started. Bit of background. So before they started the Passionistas Project, Amy was the vice president of a visual effects and post-production company, feature film at Warner Brothers, working on movies like The Matrix and Space Jam. And Nancy had her own successful theatre company and graphic design company in Boston before moving to California and working as a creative executive, producing Academy Awards campaigns for Miramax. The list just goes on, and I'm going to include some details in the show notes for you to get the full suite. I think if you think about the world of storytelling and who's really tops the cake when it comes to this, I have to admit, I'm a self-confessed fan of Oprah. And when I found out that these women were on the road show doing some interviews around the Oprah show, I was like Oprah's Master Life Class, I think it was. I'm like, are you kidding me? How is that? Really? This is just serendipitous, right? When you create these visions. So I'm really thrilled personally to be able to have Amy and Nancy join me today. But more importantly, I really invite you to connect with them, their purpose and their passion, and to definitely make sure you come along to the summit in the next couple of weeks. But firstly, Nancy, Amy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us. We're so happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
And to all of our listeners out there, this is a first for me, having two people here at once on different areas of the country. So, I'm going to throw firstly to which one of you would like to kick off. I'll give you the option. Who's that?
I always start. I'm oldest.
We're going to start with Nancy. Our sisters are doing it themselves. So, Nancy, let's kick off with you. So, why did this get started for you, and what was the passion for you behind this purpose?
Amy and I, like you said, we both had really successful careers in Hollywood, and we stumbled into this world of celebrity interviewing, which for two shy young sisters was kind of crazy that we ended up having a profession where we talk to people for a living. But we discovered this passion for interviewing people. We loved sitting down face to face with people and hearing their stories. And then in 2016, 2017, life in the US changed dramatically. We found ourselves with a president who was not necessarily good for the country and good for women in particular. And we really felt like we wanted to do something that was a little more impactful. We always tried to do pop culture content from a positive perspective, but we always felt like it was a little surface and we wanted to do something deeper. So we started talking about what we could do to help women. And that's when we decided to do the Passionistas Project Podcast, because we really just wanted to shine a light on women that were doing positive, empowered things, following their passions. At that time, the Me Too movement here had really taken shape, and we were hearing all of these really important but devastating stories of women being victimized, and we really wanted to shine a light on the positive stories of women. So that's when we started the Passionistas Project Podcast, and we've done 100 and something episodes of it. I forget how many, 8 or 9, I think. And from there, we realized that all of these women had amazing products, and women here get 2% of the venture capital funding that's given out. And, we're like, that's just not right. We just need to help these women business owners. So we started a subscription box. It's a quarterly box filled with products by women-owned businesses. And it's just been a thrill to meet all these women who are doing incredible projects and making such wonderful products. Most of them are not only just women owned, but most of them support other women, support charities, are good for the environment, are good for the world. And we just have a really fun time putting that together. And then we started the summit 3 years ago. The anniversary of women in the United States getting the right to vote, the 100th anniversary, was in 2020. And but not all women got the right to vote that day. Only white women got the right to vote that day. So we thought we would use that as a jumping off point to talk about how far women have come, but how far we still have left to go. And so that was the seed of the idea for the summit, and it has grown over the last 3 years into a 3-day global event that we are thrilled to be doing this year. It's just going to be such an amazing event.
So I'm interested a little bit more about your personal passion behind this. I know what you have, where you have come, and what you've created in the last few years is, there's a lot that goes into being able to even get a summit up, right? In the background, while you're still, doing what you do on a day-to-day basis to make sure your own life is, on track. But from a personal perspective, is there something from you that really, was there a defining moment for you, in your career where you kind of went, why me? Was there a why you have to do this? Because we could always say, isn't there enough happening in the world where that's actually getting taken care of? Was there something for you?
Yeah, I think I especially had come from a male-dominated world, business-wise. Having worked at a major motion picture studio in the 90s, I was often one of the only women, if not the only woman in the room, often taking business trips with men down to Sydney to work on The Matrix and Red Planet and other movies. And so I had come from a world where I was not comfortable working with women. I wasn't used to it. Nancy was a solopreneur. She had her own business and she had a lot of mostly female clients, but she worked alone. And so, it was partly a combination of coming to terms with, I think a lot of it, the experience I had at Warner Brothers, which was largely wonderful. For the most part, I was very fortunate. As Nancy said, we were inspired by the Me Too movement, but I had never had a Me Too moment, thank God, and neither had Nancy. But, as we've discussed with you on other occasions, being a woman in a man's world in business is a very isolating and complicated position to be in. So when we struck out together, part of the reason we did that was because I wanted to work with somebody that I could trust and that I knew had my back, and it wasn't a male energy competitive situation anymore. And so Nancy and I partnered together, partly because I just wanted to work with someone I knew I could trust. So that was building over time. And then again, like Nancy said, when the Me Too movement happened, it really, and when Donald Trump became president, it was really jarring here. It was a really dark time. Neither one of us had been particularly political people. We had started to get more interested in politics, when Obama was president. But when the Trump-Hillary Clinton campaign was going on, it was really easy to get swept up in the girl power feeling of Hillary's going to become president. And the night that Trump won, it was devastating. We were, many of the women we know were sobbing. I was sobbing. The only moment that I had a more visceral reaction to was the day Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in terms of politics. That was like my own relative had died. But so it just felt like it was time to do something important in the world, to stand up for women when we had a president who was known to have sexually harassed women, and it was out in public and everybody was okay with it. And then the Me Too movement just reinforcing like how many close calls I probably had with that kind of personality in the entertainment industry. And we just were tired of it. And again, just felt like we need to stand up for ourselves finally and for women. And as a result, we've built a community of women that give us, not to sound cliche, but are the wind beneath our wings. Like, I don't think we could get through a day now without the Passionistas community.
Yeah,
I'd like to add to that too, that, I think that for me, there was almost a sense of guilt that, like Amy said, I wasn't particularly political. I had built a life where I was in a little bubble. I was a privileged white woman. I had a very supportive husband. I created a business where I serviced mostly female clients. And I kind of thought, what's all this feminist stuff? Like, women are fine. Like, everything's fine, and Obama's president. Like, Black people are fine. Everything's good. We're all going in the right direction. And then it all came crashing down, and this heavy reality, like, oh, wait a minute. I've just been going through life with blinders on. And there are people out there that are so oppressed that I don't have a clue. And I think I felt guilty that I wasn't more aware of it. And to me, there's part of a driving passion there that, like, I feel this intense need to help people because I was so clueless for so long.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone there, actually. In hearing what you were saying, I think at some point, one of the strengths clearly as women is our concern for others. And I think that naturally falls out of potentially our maternal instincts. And what I hear when you were saying that, Nancy, is even for myself, there's a point certainly for me where even if I'm okay, if the people in the world around me are not okay, then I'm not okay. And I think that seems to be a point where and I also think, and I do want to come back to this question about the timing of the Me Too movement and Trump that I want to discuss with you. But the other thing that I'm noticing, Nancy, is we are now in a time where suddenly there's conversation about two things: passion as one, and purpose is the other, right? And, and I know that, in terms of our generation and where we've come from, we were raised in an era where that was not the driving force behind what you did when you went and got a job or pursued a career. And, you literally just one foot after the other went a linear path through education and like that, right? But then at some inevitable point, there becomes a question about what I want the rest of my life to be about. But now that we're seeing a rise, let's call it, of women, I think women's approach seems to be more connected to a more meaningful connection, which lends itself to a purpose, which is why we seem to be having these conversations. But I want to come back to you both about this question. I'm kind of going, if there is, and it's a bit wrapped up in purpose, right? I've finally found peace with that everything in life has a purpose. Everything exists for a reason. And so that's a pretty challenging thing to say when there are things in the world that are not going so great, right? So my question in specifically about where we're now at, right? Was this the silver lining on Trump? See, one of the things that I certainly notice is at the same time that Trump got in, what we found was a massive uprise of women, the Me Too movement. So my question is, from your view, do you think that despite all the upset and around that, that he got into that position, do you think that was the silver lining, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We always ask people what their mantra is, and one of ours is everything happens for a reason. And it's something our mother used to say to us whenever we got upset about something. And we really embrace that concept. And I do think that the good thing that came out of Trump, and probably the only good thing, is it woke a lot of people up. And people like us who went from being mildly interested in the world of politics and now are junkies and constantly trying to figure out ways to balance the other side so that for every bad action that's done by the other side, we can hopefully do 10 good actions to keep the world, going in the right direction. It's scary here. I mean, I don't know that that's enough to balance the fact that if Trump gets back in office, or if a lot of these local politicians get into their positions, or, the federal senators get into their positions down here during this upcoming election, we really could lose our democracy. I mean, we are teetering on a razor's edge right now of them just kind of changing the rules, or you redistricting things so that it's impossible for the Democrats to get back into office fairly. So, I think I'd go back and just wish we had some other incident that incited us to action. But I do think that it is the positive part. It woke us all up. It made us aware of everybody else's issues in a way we weren't before. It's not just about women. And frankly, since the Roe versus Wade reversal here in the States last month, men are waking up to women's issues more as well.
While you raise that, can you actually just tell us what that's about? Because many people may not be aware.
Yeah. Nan, you want to?
Yeah, so 50 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that women had the right to control their own bodies and decide if they wanted to have an abortion or not. And it was up to the woman to decide that. Very recently, the Supreme Court who now is very slanted towards the Republican side. Trump was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices while he was in office. They're all extremely conservative, and they reversed that Roe versus Wade decision and gave the right to make the decision about abortions back to the states, so that it's no longer a federal right. So now every single state gets to legislate whether their state allows women to have abortions or not. I don't remember the exact number of states, but I believe it's 15 or 18 right now. Something around between 15 and 18 states have illegalized abortion. You are no longer able to have an abortion in that state, no matter what the circumstance: rape, incest, danger to the mother. There have been cases in the past few weeks of 10, 11-year-old girls who have been raped and got pregnant, unable to get abortions, and women whose lives are literally, minutes away from death and unable to get an abortion because the rights of that fetus are more important to these people than this 10-year-old living girl or this woman who already has other children who are going to be left motherless. It's just excruciatingly painful to go through it. And it's a right that's been stripped away from us that we've had for 50 years.
Unconstitutionally. And whether someone wants to have an abortion or not, we have no judgment, and it's their choice. And that's all we're asking for. That's all women in the States are asking for, is the right to have the choice. But they're like making it so intense that doctors are facing imprisonment if they perform the procedures. So women who aren't actually even seeking an abortion, but are having a medical emergency due to a pregnancy, aren't getting the treatment that they need because the doctors are afraid to perform the procedure because they don't want to go to jail. So it goes far beyond abortion. It goes to just, to us, abortion is medical care regardless, but it goes to the core issue of like doctors not treating patients. And it also, the Supreme Court's decision, all of the judges on the Supreme Court write their kind of additional notes to the decision. And one of the Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, in his opinion, also snuck in like, well, thumbs up on this one. And now we should talk about, marriage equality. And we should talk about all these other issues that, it's a slippery slope. So we all are, those of us that are interested in this are aware that it starts with stripping women of the right to choose. The next thing they're going to do is try and reverse the decisions from some years ago to allow gay marriage. The next thing they're going to do is to go after interracial marriage. I mean, it's just this, it's the writing's on the wall, which is why we're so passionate about it, because as privileged white women, we have been very lucky to avoid all these issues, but it's the women who are from minority communities that have been, already marginalized when it comes to things like healthcare. And now this just makes life even worse for them. They have to travel across state lines in some cases to get an abortion if they could even afford that. A lot of people can't afford to do that. So again, it's the reason why, especially for the summit, the Power of Passionistas Summit for us is we focus on women from marginalized communities and giving them a stage to talk about the issues that are important to them, because they're not allowed to have a voice and to speak for themselves. So we just want to give our platform to people to be able to tell their stories so that we can all understand how things like these decisions are impacting them, and to be able to walk away from the conversation saying, okay, how can we all do our small part to be supportive of your community? What can we do to make your lives a little easier? And with each, you were the one that said it in something that in an interview we did with you. It's the small changes. Don't underestimate the power of a small group of people to make a change, because that's the only way it happens. And we think of that quote from you all the time, because that's really what we're trying to do, is just small changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, can of worms. So thank you for shedding light on that. And I think thank you for being the voice of all those who don't have a voice to it. And I can hear that what you're doing, I think it would be very easy to say, when we look in the world at things like women's movements or summits or events, that it could occur in a world where it is about the fun side or the uplifting experience or the, bells and whistles and rah-rah, right? And but what I'm really hearing with what you're up to is it is completely, whilst of course your experience from certainly what I've seen with what you've created does give women an environment where they can express that actually the intent and what it's really about is giving women the experience of having that voice. And when they have that voice, there's almost permission. I think you're giving them then permission that it's okay to be dealing with what you're dealing with, have somewhere where you can express how that impacts you. And then, as you and I and all of us, well, the three of us know that when we do that, it creates a new momentum, right? So it's not just the storytelling, it's what the storytelling provides for those women and then what's available to them as a result of doing that, right? So I do want to give you some space to be able to share about, we've talked a lot. I mean, I think the issues that you've brought to the foreground really do talk a lot about the need for this to happen. And I'm really in shock and disbelief almost in some aspects, really, that we would have to go so far backwards on these issues. But putting all that aside for a moment, because I do want to give you an opportunity to share about the impact and the difference of the work that you are doing and the underlying intent that exists for women when they show up to these things. So, you've got these summits and you've got an extraordinary network of women who have coming into these things. Can you give us some insight about, what kind of things occur or the stories that you're seeing as a result of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah. One of the communities that we really like to focus on with the summit that is still extremely underserved community is the disability community. We've had the privilege of getting to know several women in the disability community over the last few years. And as appalling as what we were just talking about is, even more appalling is what happens in this country with people in the disabilities community. And we personally have learned so much, and we know from people that have come to the summit that it has resonated and that other people are learning and trying to make a difference in this world. I mean, here in the United States, we have a ridiculously low minimum wage as it is. But there are states in this country where people with disabilities are paid sub-minimum wage. So it is legal to pay people with disabilities at sometimes 22 cents on the dollar. And then people wonder why people with disabilities live in poverty, and if you're disabled and you try to work, you lose your benefits. It's just appalling how people with disabilities are treated in this country. And so we've really focused on that in every summit and in other events that we've done. And we've heard back from so many people that what we said resonated, and they think of that all the time, and they ask local stores to make sure their bathrooms are accessible and their counters are an appropriate height, and little things like that you can do to become aware and to make other people are aware of the challenges faced by people with disabilities that, again, as privileged, abled women, it didn't occur to us. I never thought about, the counter height is so high in this store. Like, never occurred to me. Now I know if I see something, I say something. So I think we hear stories like that a lot of people that have really learned something at the summits and have, just made a small attempt at making a change.
Yeah, I really love that as a mantra, when you see something, say something. It sounds simple but so powerful. And but to say something, one has to see something. And I think what I also heard there is the very first thing and the most important thing is that we're able to be conscious and have awareness to that which is happening around us. And I know this sounds like a very dumbed down version of my own experience, but there was a time when I'd say I was unconscious to so many things. But I'll give a very dumbed down version of one, right? Because I think we can all assimilate. Is when we go to the bathroom, when you go to a public toilet and you go to the toilet and, you're conscious of your own kind of, your own experience, really. You go to the bathroom, you make sure you're taking care of that the seat's not wet and all of that, right? But that's about it. You're not really paying attention to anything else, right? And I remember it was actually a practice that was recommended when I did a leadership program back in, 2000, 2001. And one of the practices you had to do was every time you go to the bathroom, you had to pick up what was on the floor and leave the bathroom in a better state than what it was when you went in there. That was over 20 years ago. Do you know, to this day, every time I now go into the public toilet, it blows my mind actually how dirty they often are. And then I get annoyed with myself that I now have this practice because when I go into those bathrooms, I'm picking up, people must think I'm insane. I was saying, what are you doing picking up toilet paper off the floor, But I'm like, but everything that just goes to the point about what you're saying is everything matters, because then when the next person walks into the bathroom, or the next 100, let's say, who walk into that bathroom, they're not confronted with, oh, this is a shit and dirty place, isn't it? That they're walking into an environment that doesn't do that to them. So I know that's a very kind of example you want to call it, but I think one we can all agree on, right? That we've had that experience. But I think if we all adopted that mantra, if I see something, say something. If I see something, do something. But to do that, I think my call out certainly on this one is first start taking a better look around you, because I know even for myself, it's so easy to get stuck on the drama of my own life, my own circumstances, that I'm not conscious in those moments. Like, it's impossible to be conscious to what's happening with the person next door to you if you're inside dealing with your own, issues. So it takes something first and foremost. But I really want to thank you for calling that out, because I do think that is a very simple and practical way to impact change.
Well, and I also think the core of it is we have to listen to the people who are living these experiences. And we've had so many women from the disability community, from the Indigenous community here in the States, from, all these marginalized communities saying to us, like, thank you so much for giving us this forum to tell our stories. Because one of the problems with women in marginalized communities is they don't get to speak for themselves. So we don't hear directly from them what their needs are, because it's filtered through the cisgender white guys on CNN or the local news. So, see something, say something, but first actually listen to what people are going through every day. And I promise you, if you tune in and hear 1/5 of the stories at this summit, you are going to be more aware of people's experiences, and it's impossible to not try and implement things to help their communities improve in your day-to-day life. And it's the simple little things. It's the picking up the trash, or it's the asking a restaurant to, make sure they have accessible bathrooms, even if you don't need them. But we interviewed a woman who we're giving an award to, named Rebecca Coakley, and she's a disability rights activist at the Ford Foundation. And she said, if I'm being loud, it's because you're not listening. And, we all need to just be quiet for a little bit and listen to what people are going through. And that will inspire us to be better advocates.
Absolutely. Listening. I mean, still, I think there's the illusion when we talk about storytelling that it's about telling, but the telling can only show up in the listening, right?
Yeah.
So we are coming towards a close. I mean, I could just spend hours, as you always know, we can often do that, but and there are so many, I know, extraordinary women that you have and the panels that you have on this summit that is coming up. There is really so much you could talk to. And I know it would probably do you a disservice to try to look for one. But, in terms of, I want to, from your perspective, though, from your personal passion about this, what is the thing that you're really looking forward to about this summit?
Oh, that's hard. That's like asking me to choose my favorite child.
I have an answer. You want me to answer?
You have an
it?
answer? Yeah, go for it.
Part of the reason we chose the platform for the summit that we chose is because it has a speed networking function. So during certain breaks during the summit, in between these storyteller events, the attendees and the participants will be able to have these 5-minute one-on-one video conference chats with each other. And I just know some of the women and non-binary people and men who are invited, who are buying tickets to attend. Men do not speak on the panels, but men are welcome to attend the summit. And I'm looking forward to hearing what people tell us about those one-on-one conversations, because I already know the people I would like to connect, and we try and connect people directly as much as we can. But I think that it's, a lot of times you go to a summit and you listen and you go home and that's the end of it. But we're building a community. And I think the speed networking component of this is going to allow people to talk about the panel they just saw, the storytellers they just saw, and really continue to build a connection with each other, which is, at the end of the day, our ultimate goal with the Passionistas Project, is to build a support network of women and non-binary people who can be there for each other. And I think the speed networking is taking the summit to a new level this year.
Wow. That is an extraordinary opportunity for people to be part of. Thank you. And so, Nancy, anything for you now about what you see that you're most looking forward to?
I just want everybody to hear all of these women's stories. I think one thing that's great is that everything's recorded, and your ticket allows you to go back and rewatch or watch things you missed, because it is an overwhelming amount of content. We have a film festival, we have an awards ceremony, we have a voting rights panel, and then we have 10 storyteller events. And so it's jam-packed 3 full days. And I think people might be overwhelmed by the idea that I can't watch it all. But the beauty of this platform is you can go back and see what you missed, and you'll have access to it afterwards. And I just want every single person to attend to be able to watch every single moment of it, because these women are amazing. They're just phenomenal women, and the stories are going to blow your mind.
And I'd just like to add that after the run through we did with your panel yesterday, I really do think it's going to be one of the highlights of the entire event. The group of people you have assembled is the highest caliber, most informative, most interesting. And we're so grateful to you. And we really hope that everybody listening will sign up just to attend your panel, if nothing else, because it's going to be having met you has been life-changing for us, and your panel is going to be life-changing for anybody that attends and is lucky enough to see it.
I think you've hit the nail on the head right there. I think the word life-changing is what I'm present to for people who do come, for all the reasons that you've mentioned. you know, the life-changing experience, just like you say in yesterday's conversation, when I heard Louise Sullivan start to share with us the story that she's, you know, telling about her experience. And but also having been at the summit last year and listening to some of the storytellers you had last year, when we listen to other people's stories, it is life-changing, really life-changing. And so I think for the opportunity of really having a life-changing experience and knowing that you don't have to just jam everything in, you know, in a 24-hour period, that you can kind of get access to these things, I think is really remarkable. So thank you for what you've done to really pull this together. I know it takes a lot of effort to make it something as extraordinary like this happen. And thank you for joining me today. Is there anything else finally that you want to share about before we jump off? I am going to do something a little different to complete today because of the value of what I think you've put the spotlight on in particular, and I think the difference this is going to make. I'm actually going to end on a poem that's called "The Starfish Story." But I just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything final or any final comments you'd like to share with our audience.
I would just like to say too that you know, it's an extremely valuable summit. Like you said, it's life-changing. The ticket price is extremely reasonable. However, that said, we do not want to exclude anyone from attending this summit, because we do believe that, you know, the marginalized women are affected the most by these issues. So we do have a scholarship program that we want people to know about. And if anybody who hears this really wants to attend and can't afford it, please email us. You can, or DM us on any of our social media. We have a scholarship program where we have tickets for people who can't afford to buy one. And conversely, if you do have the means and want to buy a package of scholarship tickets for other people, there's the opportunity to do that as well. So we always like to be able to give people the opportunity to pay it forward, but also to take advantage of that scholarship if this sounds like something that could really change your life, but you don't have the means to attend.
That's just great. Thank you. That's wonderful. Anything for you, Amy?
I just think, you know, there used to be a commercial here in the 70s it was called the Hair Club for Men. And the tagline was the guy who would say, I'm not just the president, I'm a member. And you go, oh, wow, great hair plugs. But we're not just the founders of this. We are the ultimate recipients of how this can change your life. Like I said earlier, we wouldn't make a day without this community. And we just want to welcome people to be a part of it. We know the value of it, and we know how important it is, not only to the women who are sharing their stories, but to people who need a place where they feel accepted, regardless of who they are, what their background is, what their financial status. We don't define success by a paycheck and status and a title. We define success by doing what is best for you. And we embrace anybody who is looking for a safe place. So we just want you to know you're welcome, and we'd love to have you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. So I'm going to invite each and every one of us actually and I'm going to use the word listening, given the power of our ability to impact and make a life-changing difference. And this goes for all of you too who are tuned in today, and to hear yourself in the opportunity of this poem for yourself, and see that at some level the power of it for yourself. And of course, to close off specifically, Nancy, Amy, we are going to put all the details of the show notes and links to the event, and so that people can definitely reach out and connect with you. So to complete that, I would like, given I think what Amy and Nancy both highlighted about the opportunity to make a real difference, and I did want to share this poem with you. It's called The Starfish Story, and I am going to make a little bit of a change though, because the story was written in the context of a man. I was using the language of a man, but given that we're creating a women's summit here, I'm going to just kind of ad lib a little bit. So one day there was a woman walking along the beach when she noticed a little girl picking up and gently throwing things into the ocean. Approaching the little girl, she said, "Little girl, what are you doing?" And the girl replied, I'm throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. And if I don't throw them back, they're going to die. The woman laughed to herself and she said, do you realize there are miles and miles and miles of beach and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of starfish? You can't possibly make any difference. After listening politely, the girl bent down, picked up another starfish, threw it into the surf, and then with a big smile on her face, looked up at the woman and said, well, it made a difference to that one. So thank you for joining me. It has been a remarkable conversation, and I'm looking forward to the summit and seeing and listening to all the fabulous stories. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
having
much.
us. Everything you've done for us. We really appreciate it.
Very welcome.